Is it both? Is it the screen plus the audio?
It should be. So okay, it's pretty simple so like we've discussed before. I should just sort of qualify this a little bit. I wasn't expecting quite such a big group. I was expecting primarily Aaron, but okay. What we're looking at right now is just a spatially filtered small portion of, I think it's somewhere in Long Beach. And the assumption, whenever you create any event data, right, is that there's a route already in existence on which to create the event. So, and that's the responsibility of the GIS unit to handle. So in this case, I'm just creating the simplest of cases where we have a new route. This dotted line represents a route that's been created. And we just need to create one or more functional class events on top of this route. So the steps to do it are pretty simple. Just insert the feature. The feature we want to insert is F-class, and we draw it. There are some specific configurations in GeoMedia that have to be set up to make it draw in a way that it sticks to the geometry, and that's all, I think, pretty well documented in the written workflow that I provided. So you just draw it. It traces the route. Right-click and say End Feature. And when you do that, again, assuming you have this configuration set up right here, it pops up the Properties dialog box to enter properties. Now, when this Properties dialog box comes up, you have to populate the stuff in red. So these two things in red. That would be the LRS key and the LRM. And of course, as I usually do when I first digitize this, I think, oh, I forgot to get the LRS key that's relevant to this new route. Let me go grab it and just do it over. So I'm going to double click on this. The LRS key is right here. Just going to copy this guy. All right. And let's just, for training's sake, say that from here to here is going to be one functional class, and then from here to up here is going to be another. So we're just going to make one event to here, and the feature, the LRS key, is what I've copied. I'm going to paste that right here. Oops. No, don't discard the feature. All right, come on. There, so I just put in the LRS key that I grabbed from before. For now, I'm going to not populate the measures because I don't know what they are. I'm just going to say the functional class is 4. And in this case, since it's off system, the LRM is going to be all roads. You say, okay. And thinks about it. You know what? I've found, I need to add this to the documentation, but I've found the reality is that the first time I digitize in a GeoMedia session, it crashes when I first add the record. I don't know why. It would be worth opening a ticket because it's consistent. But
it crashes about 30% of the time. Marv and I have been doing this like 2 months, and it crashes about 30% of the time. Thank you.
30? Yeah. Yeah. That's my experience. I mean, just I'm sure you're right, Leo. I'm just saying my experience, if it crashes the first time, then after that it stays open. I don't know why.
Marvin done
I think,
like 1,000 over the last 3 months, and it crashes like 30% of the time.
okay, well, I would say the best resolution is to talk to the software developer, because it really shouldn't crash when you're just doing that. So anyhow, what you get are these labels. So you notice they open right back up real fast, and that's because it's only reading the data within the spatial filter. So okay, so at this point, it's done. We gave it feature class 4. So at this point, the next step is to simply look at these labels and populate the begin measure and end measure appropriately. So in this case, the begin measure is 0, and the end measure is 1.02. And GeoMedia is doing some magic to look at the line you just drew, figure out the begin and end location of the line you drew as it relates to the underlying route, and figure out the measure at each respective location on the route. So the begin measure is 0, end measure is 1.02. You say, okay, you're done. The feature is entered. I'll do it one more time here just to finish up the route. All right. LRM all roads. Crossing my fingers it doesn't crash. All right, good. Just like I expected, it didn't this time.
Can I ask a question, Adam? See,
Yeah,
I like you have those gray labels there to tell you the begin measure and end measure to type into the table. But it seemed like it'd be much more. That's nice, but it seemed like it'd be much more efficient if those begin measures and end measures went directly into the function class table directly, without having to manually type them in. If the software can calculate the gray labels, begin measure and end measures, why can't I just go ahead and put it in the FClass table directly? It takes away the chance.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be great. The bottom line is that the how do I put it? I'm hesitant to say the software can't do it, because it can, but you have to do some custom programming to make it do that at the right time. It is possible to use the update attributes command, but that's a whole other set of button clicks. So it's possible to use this guy and then identify the query that has this information, and then tell it which, basically these are functional attributes if you're used to working with functional attributes in GeoMedia. And you have to tell it which functional attribute to populate into the begin measure and end measure, and then press go. And to my estimation, that's more trouble than just double-clicking on this and reading it off and putting it in. It's possible to do some custom programming to, like, so that, you know, when GeoMedia detects this particular feature class, you could click on it, then right-click and say, like, populate measures from, you know, these labels, essentially. But that would be custom programming that you guys have to maintain yourselves, and I don't think that would be a good route for you to go, especially given the projected longevity of this workflow anyway. But then, again, I know you guys have had, I've made a point to not build one-off custom programming in GeoMedia that the vendor, the Intergraph, is not responsible for maintaining, because you guys have had lots of bad experiences with creating custom programming for ArcGIS that, you know, needs to be maintained. You know, ArcGIS moves on, gets out, and then your programming doesn't work in the next version, and about, you know, there's lots of reasons why that's a pain. But that said, Leo, I think your point is perfectly valid, and I totally agree. It would be more efficient if it just went straight into the hard attributes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyhow, populate this guy, 1.02, 1.671, give it a functional class of, I don't know, 2, whatever, and blam, it's gone. Fundamentally, the workflow is that. That's how you enter events. But you know, as we've discussed in the past, what you're doing is you're creating a geometry, and then GeoMedia is reading that geometry and interpreting the measure values that are appropriate for it, based on the underlying route that you traced over to generate that geometry. So, you know, there's a risk there, right? That your digitized geometry can be inconsistent with your measured geometry, because there's frankly nothing stopping us from changing this from 167 to 1.6. Oops. And if we were, so what we're looking at right now is physical geometry, but if we were to Dynseq this, it would go to 1.6, which is probably about right, I don't know, right here, rather than all the way up to here. And that, from a, you know, from a map making perspective, that's no problem, but when you submit those measures to HPMS, for example, the resulting dynamically segmented information will be, it won't look like this. It'll only come to here. So we have a QA/QC workflow for making sure that the measures and the physical geometry are consistent with each other.
Adam, before you go on, this is Nick, one question.
Yeah, sure.
For the second segment, say if you change the route ID, should the begin and end measure be reset from 0 to whatever the length is again? Or it's going to be continuous?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? I'm not sure I understood.
For the second segment, because you have the same route ID, right? So it makes sense if the begin and end measure is continuously from the endpoint of the last one. But if you change the route ID, which is a whole new segment, so the begin and end measure should change too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, if there was another route right here, it would have a separate route ID and its own set of measures.
If we change the route ID right now for the second segment, what would be the
I still have a feeling I'm not. Well, let me put it this way. Let me delete this guy.
No, keep that guy, but yeah, you can create.
Let's do this. So, well, just to help to refresh your memory, so this guy ended at 1.02. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that we want our next feature to begin here and end here.
Endpoint. Begin at the same endpoint.
The reason you came because
well, but let's not.
Only one round.
I'm hoping to answer your question a little better. So I'm going to end this feature.
From one street to another street, it may be continuous, but it's not the same road. From like maybe it's ended.
Yeah, you can't have an event that goes that spans multiple routes. That's just that's nonsensical in the LRS world.
It's just go with the underlying route. If you have this route, this one, if you or the base layer, you break into 2 segments with 2 different routes, and you create from here to here will be different route ID.
Yeah. Can you do
But
that?
because right now this underlying route is only one route, one ID. The whole thing is one route, one ID, one route.
Okay.
One route have different functional classification. So that's why he
You
breaks
have to
into
create the second one. So,
when you create a second one, the only thing changed is the functional classification.
really?
Changed. The route ID is still the same as these. So that's why
It has to be that way, Adam?
it depends on the underlying route. If you have another route, you break right here, you have a new, totally new route. So when from here to here, it's one route with functional classification. You start from here, it will start with 0 again with the new route. It's tied to the underlying the route.
So you're saying
Did Aaron,
background.
what I'm hearing Aaron say makes good sense to me. Did Aaron answer the question?
not exactly.
I guess, Adam, the clarification is that, are you creating the geometry or are you creating the event?
Events.
Yeah, so if it's event, there is an underlying route, right? So there is an LRS that you're setting the event on top. So if you want to break that route, that means that you have to change the LRS.
Oh,
Is
okay.
that correct, Adam?
So you have to redraw that route.
Question is.
No, we can't redraw it. Only ChatSat can redraw the route table.
No,
Only-
but for my question.
Okay.
So,
Right,
Yeah,
yeah, then you have to break that route into two.
but only ChatSat can change the route table.
Okay.
Yeah, we can only change the function class, begin measure, end measure, and LRM. That's the only thing we can change.
Okay,
We
got
can't-
it, Adam.
We can't change the route ID. Only ChatSat can change route ID.
Okay. So, okay, is that all cleared up?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, you know what, let me just get my, get us back where we were then. Here to here, and the feature. Just give it some random functional class. Say OK. Oh, good. It did its job. All right, and then 102 to 167. Okay, and by the way, you can see that the you can see what requires what's the word? Needs measures still populated. So I just deleted the begin measure here, and now the labels just pop up. When basically by seeing the labels, you know that in event F class record is missing one of its measures. That's sort of the visual cue. Okay, so let me get back. So maybe before I move on to the QA/QC portion, is there? Well, are there any more questions that I can answer on this side?
So I have a question about the NHS. Is the NHS workflow similar to what you were just doing right now?
No, it's not. In the case of NHS, we're using a different tool to create events, and with NHS, we're not actually digitizing geometry over the routes. We're using another tool. I can show you the tool called Insert LRS Events, and it populates begin measures and end measures in a manner a little bit closer to what Leo described, where you just click a begin location and you click an end location, and then the begin and end measures are populated. The reason there's a bunch of reasons I didn't take that approach, but it fundamentally boils down to performance, because there are I think about 1.5 million event records in the database, and you can't spatially filter them without physical geometry stored in the database. So basically, every time you would run this tool without a physical geometry, it'll take like 20 minutes to run.
A little good news there. You know Andy Richardson from Caltrans staff?
Yeah.
Yes. He used Access and he consolidated it down, so now it's like 25% smaller than that, what it said. It's from 1.2 million down to 900,000. That's one piece of good news. And the other piece of good news is we talked with FHWA, and they want to maintain NHS in a similar parallel process as function class. They want to see both the left and the right alignment, and they want to see the ramps. And so in reality, I know right now you think NHS is so much smaller than the function class, but it's not. It's only going to be 10% smaller. And so
okay.
we really want to have parallel workflows for function class and NHS. As we mentioned in the last meeting, Mandy did a reorganization of our office. Nadi retired, and Rose and I merged in with HPMS staff. And so now her goal for the next couple of years is she wants to assign one staff person per district, and they would maintain all 68 fields, the NHS, the function class for that district. And so there's many reasons to have the NHS workflow and the function class workflow be consistent. We don't want we don't want NHS to be in Spanish. We don't want function class to be in German. We want it to be in the same parallel process. Okay.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, if that was never a requirement in the past, if that's a new requirement we need to meet, then what I would suggest is to modify the NHS workflow to be like this. Because the NHS workflow as it currently stands won't work for functional class.
It's not
yeah.
a decision that has been made yet. I'm just exploring what are the differences. So don't change anything yet.
Okay.
We're still looking into it.
Sure.
Maybe at the end of this function class, maybe you can give a quick demo of the NHS just to compare at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just kind of as a point of reference, this is the number of records in the functional class feature class for the whole state. 1,253,845. It's a considerable data set, and takes a long time to dissect everything.
And that's including the functional class 7, right?
Yeah, this is everything.
So I know that we talked about maybe not query the functional class 7, exclude that. Would that speed up the operations of the software?
Yeah.
Is that feasible?
I've put some time into looking into that, and frankly, Chad has put, I think, a good amount of time into looking into it. My instinct is no, it's not feasible. There's a few reasons, but I think that the really the nugget of the reason why I don't think that's a good idea is because what it ultimately does is pushes the responsibility for creating functional class 7 events onto the end users, really onto the HPMS staff for the purpose of HPMS submittal. So I don't know. That's my thinking. Is if people really do want, event measures for their functional class 7 data, which I know they do in the case of HPMS submittal, then all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. And those people, those end users, are the ones who are going to have to deal with the enormous data volumes, rather than the people that are, in theory, responsible for, creating and managing the functional class data.
Like I said before, though, Rose and I are now part of the HPMS staff. It's not like you still think of Rose and I in different branch, but Rose and I and Marvin are all on the HPMS staff now, are on the HPMS staff. We're all on the same team now.
Okay.
Okay. At the last meeting, you talked about other alternatives to help the software run faster. Specifically, you talked about when a route crosses a county boundary, to have it restart to 0 again. He said that would help it run faster, and Aaron was all excited about that. He said that's exactly what we want. We want it to restart at 0 at cross county boundary. Is that still a good option?
I think there might be something there. The thing is that what is an option is to split functional class events. So not route. I mean, we could also split routes. There'd be no harm in that. But the thing that could be a different way to manage performance is to split functional class events at county boundaries, and then add a column to the functional class table that identifies what county each individual event is in. And then that would give you the option to only DIAMSEG events on a county-by-county basis. It would be, so that's one way to improve performance. You're basically segmenting the data and adding an attribute that you can query on. So like it can do an attribute query on. That's not what Aaron was excited about. Aaron was excited about splitting underlying routes at county boundaries, which honestly could also happen. It would just be another separate exercise. And it's something we should talk about, but it's a separate subject. Because I think there might be something there. Anyhow, that's something we could do. And what that would mean is that would be an alternative way that would open up, make it more feasible to remove the physical geometry portion of the functional class data, and then use a more NHS-like workflow for data maintenance. I did consider that, or I should say we considered that pretty thoroughly before I built this workflow. I think that, but there's like I said in our last meeting, there's a bunch of advantages to having this geometry like right here and ready to go in a physical cached kind of state. And you lose those advantages. I'd be happy to kind of rehash what I think what I know those advantages are. But I think you'd be giving up more than you'd be gaining by doing that.
Another option you talked about was within the current function class workflow would be some type of query or symbology that would clearly identify where the two geometries don't match. Were you able to follow up on that?
Oh yeah, that's the QA/QC. Yep.
Okay,
shall I move on to that?
Sure, you bet.
Okay. You know what? Let me bounce this guy. Okay, so what we have right now is a couple of simple events that are populated properly, but I'm gonna go out of my way to make a mistake. All right, and I'm gonna say that okay, this even though this guy, well here, if we look at our labels again, 1.02 to 1.671. Let's just say I make a mistake and say 1.20, which is wrong, right? You guys all see that? Here, give me a verbal confirmation that you guys can see that I made a mistake here. Okay, well, okay, so as far as this workspace is concerned, you're done because you populated the measures. But I've constructed a separate workspace that you can use to check your work. And I'm sure that, well, let me open this guy up. All right, so these red guys indicate that there's an issue. Now, what's happening here, so it's really clear. It's really clear just by the fact that there's a big thick red line here that there is a problem. And we know what the problem is, right, is that, I should be clear that, so, okay, these two Geo workspaces are reading data from the same source back in Oracle, so they're reading the same data. So what I'm going to do now is you can see that the DynSeg version, so that the red is the result of the dynamic segmentation for this issue segment. And we can see that the physical geometry goes like that, but the issue is like that. So what that's telling me is that either the physical geometry is wrong or the measures are wrong because they're not consistent with each other. I would, if I was just sort of maintaining data, I would say, okay, well, it looks to me like the physical geometry is right because it begins where the last one ends. And we pumped in the measures wrong, which is exactly what we did. So if we go back here, so this is our actual maintenance workspace, and just remove begin measure, look at our labels again, and then put in the right information, 1.02, say OK. Now at this point, if we refresh the workspace, then the red goes away because we fixed the problem. And by the way, we could have fixed the problem in this workspace as well. But you'd have to go, the handy labels for seeing the measures aren't readily available. You would have had to grab the measure from either the previous event or something else. So that's the basic. Yeah, I was just saying, that's the basics of how the QA/QC workspace is intended to work. The basic intent is that events that have an inconsistency, you get some visual feedback saying, hey, there's an inconsistency here. And let me just real quickly show you the analysis it's doing to find that inconsistency. What it's doing is it's asking, okay, so we're basically doing a DynSeg of functional class here, and then here we have a functional attribute where we figure out the distance from the center point of the physical geometry to the center point of the Deinzig geometry in miles. And then we take that query and we ask, okay, if that distance is greater than 0.00009, and I did a few other things that were relevant just based on playing around and figuring out what would be relevant. It spits back the information at you.
Adam?
Yeah.
When I read through the GeoMedia tutorial, not your tutorial, but when I read through the GeoMedia tutorial, it says you can only open one GeoWorks space at one time. How did you open two at one time? Do you have a different license than we do?
No. I'm using your license.
Okay, well, I'm glad. It's good to see that. That's good news. Thank you. And then second question is, thank you for showing us how you calculated that query there. It compares the Deinzig length versus the geometry length. That's very nice.
Yeah, sure.
And on a statewide basis, Marvin went through, we found that there are 2,000 things that highlights. Unfortunately, of those 2,000 things that highlights, only 7% wind up being actual errors. Because it tends to, when you do the geospatial filter, every time it crosses the geospatial filter, it tends to cause problems with the query. So you wind up with 2,000 potential errors, but in reality, it's only 7% errors. 7% of those 2,000. So anyway,
but you said you did it statewide, right? Which means there was no
county by county. We did all 58 counties one at a time.
Yeah, I know. You're right. You're absolutely right. You're going to see what look like, what will kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, and all I can say is you're going to have to use some human judgment and experience to know that, okay, the stuff on the periphery of my filters are not real errors. And if you want to look at them, just make sure that your filter, like if you're looking, I mean, look, let's face it, the reality is that you'll be entering and editing data in specific chunks of areas. And then after you do a bunch of data edits, add a new subdivision or whatever, you'll want to build a filter that includes the whole thing.
Right.
And then look at the errors in the data that you've actually been working with.
So thank you. This query is helpful, but it kind of has a limited scope. Remember last week we talked about in some situations, the GeoWorkspace still shows the old geometry. In function class, you had two geometries, and sometimes still showing on the old geometry. You said you could maybe modify this query or make a new query to highlight or displaying the old geometry.
Yeah.
Were you able to do that?
Well, I haven't worked on that particular problem, but I am really confident that if we can identify the conditions that we want to be able to query for,
okay, I can give you an example.
Pretty sure we can do that.
I can give you an example right now. Can you do a spatial filter? Can you do a spatial filter to Sacramento County, please?
Yeah, sure. Oh, darn it. Should I be, no, I should be on the QA/QC workspace, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. QA/QC, by the way, is slower because we're actually doing dynamic segmentation, right? That's part of the reason I isolated it to a separate workspace so that you can actually do your digitizing in a nice, snappy environment over here, and then check for errors in what's inevitably going to be a slightly slower environment.
basically done is currently he was in Long Beach, and now he's using the spatial filter to go to Sacramento County.
How long it takes to run this?
On my computer, it takes like 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the time of day, whether it's in the morning or lunchtime or afternoon. At lunchtime, it takes 10 minutes. So it depends on the time of day.
No.
All right.
Okay, we can't wait that long.
Let's talk lunchtime.
You know what, maybe over here, it'll run a little bit better. I want to kill this one. Yeah. All right, this is good. Fit by legend entry. Here we go. All right. So this isn't going to show it. This isn't the QA/QC workspace, but
Okay. Do you know Sacramento a little bit? Do you know like South Sacramento, I-5 and 160, State Route 160 area? You want me to take control of the map?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sitting in the corner.
Okay. Yeah, the whole county draws real nicely. Boy, it's pretty small screen here. Sorry. Where's the zoom key? Right there. Oh, I got it. Let me go closer to the pocket area. And, oh, how do I turn the layers off and on? I don't see the...
I know Randy.
Which layer do you want to see?
Let's just start and only show the routes layer. Where you see it, Martin? Yeah, but where's the layer control? Okay, it's just small, I'm sorry. Okay, so it's kind of unique. Zoom in a hair closer. Okay, this is I-5. This is 160, and at this point it changes name to Freeport Boulevard. I think people in the room are probably familiar with this. And so this portion down here is on the LRM of TSN. Anyway, and anyway, let me show you. So it clearly is on the routes table. It's just one route. Can you turn off the jurisdictions, please?
Sure.
The jurisdictions off?
Yeah, they're gone.
Okay. Clearly, this is just a single carriageway all through here. Okay, now go ahead and turn on the function class layer. Can I do it? Let's see. Display. It's just so small, it's hard for me to see.
Yeah, that's okay.
And at this elevation, it looks pretty smooth. It looks like no problem whatsoever. Let me zoom into the problem area now. This is the scary part is, this is doing it pretty close, but it still looks pretty good. Let me go, like now when I zoom in closer, you'll see the area I'm talking about. It'll be some of it shows the old alignment, and some of it will show the. Don't go too far. Marvin is my senior.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right there.
Okay. See this part right here?
Yeah, I see it.
This is showing a tail on the old alignment, and this down here, this dual alignment is on the old alignment also. As I showed earlier, all this through here is only a single, on the current geometry, it's all a single alignment. And unfortunately, the function class field is showing part on the old alignment, part on the new alignment. This is all, go ahead and turn off function class again to show you, refresh your memory, the display off.
Yeah, I can see the dotted lines underneath the functional class. I get the point.
Okay.
I get the point.
So earlier you asked, you wanted me to show you an example of what we want your query to find. This is the thing we want to find. We want to find where the current geometry doesn't match the old geometry. If you can find something quick and easy to zoom into these problem areas, we'll see what happened is last April we got the database from Chico. but ever since April, Tim on chat staff has been updating the geometry. In this case, Tim updated the geometry, but the function class stays on the old geometry. And from April till now, with that 7-8 months, he's done quite a few changes. And and Marvin and I found some of them. I found a lot of them, but we don't think we found all of them. We just need a fast way to verify whether it's showing a 2 geometry system or 1 geometry system.
Okay.
So this is the example. Fine.
Yeah, I'll do some poking around to see. I mean, that shouldn't be a difficult thing to detect. And honestly, I think the QA/QC workspace should find that already.
It does
but
not.
I'd want to test it. Yeah, maybe it doesn't. In which case,
Okay.
I can better trap that kind of error.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question about, so when something like this happens, right, what is the impact?
I can answer that. I mean, the impact is that you have event data in the system. I mean, basically, by the very nature of the fact that, can you see this, Mandy? That there's some a purple line here that doesn't have a dotted line underneath it, and
Right.
here. So the impact is that there's data that says there's functional class information here, but there is no route for the measures to live on.
It's living on the old alignment. It's living on the old alignment, not the new alignment.
So that means that when HPMS is submitting the data, that segment will have no data on
Yeah,
that segment.
that's right.
Create a problem for you guys and not be able to submit the data. So it's critical to fix all these.
Well, actually, that's not true. In HPMS, I think that you can have I mean, this is section data from the HPMS vernacular, and you can have sections that don't link to route catalog. Come to think of it, that's allowed. It's not good practice, but it wouldn't. Yeah. The bottom line is, yes, you're right, man. You want to find these errors and fix them. I mean, you should not have events with no routes to live on.
It's a continuous process. Like I said, from last April to now, Tim has been daily updating the geometry layer, and he's going to continue to do that. It's going to keep happening. And so it is important to find a quick and easy way to zoom into these areas where the old geometry has met new geometry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Leo. And that's the intended job of the QA/QC workspace.
But the current
I agree that we should. I mean, my fervent hope is that we'll make that QA/QC workspace as good as it can be, and then you guys will send me on my way, and you will continue to improve it after I am gone.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't the HPMS V8 software be able to find all these? Because they do a comparison too, right? They look at the routes, and whenever a route doesn't have the event on top, doesn't have data on top, it flags you, right?
Design HPMS, my understanding is the event is dissect on the route. It has to be, but based on the last confirmation from Joe, is the event doesn't have to. It has to 100% link to the route layer, which is to contradict with what my understanding. But they said they're in process of improving or something.
Well, the goal is to have all of
Right.
them match, but right now they're calculating it from the section table.
So the section table doesn't have for now. It looks like the program will accept the submittal if the section it doesn't really 100% link with the route. It's my understanding, but
I thought last submittal you guys ran into the problems where you couldn't submit because there are routes where their data doesn't link to the route, something like that.
It's different. I think.
It's different?
Yeah.
But my
But is there a measure for those two, like begin and end measure for those two?
so
duplicate
the
routes?
question would be this one and this one appear as a two record in the event table.
One record.
One record.
Yeah,
But when it dissect, it creates two geometry.
Um,
How could that be? If it's one record, when dissect, it could be
That's in Leo's
No, it's
question.
two records.
two records.
No, it's
supposed to
one
be
record, because it's a two geometry system, it shows up.
So it doesn't matter.
Can you click on the attribute of the?
For HPMS, if it's only one record, when you dissect, you only get one return. Then it would be either this geometry or this geometry.
It depends on the measure too. If it's different measure, then you duplicate record.
So when I look at the event table for the
Attribute,
functional
yeah.
classification, because for functional classification, all we need HPMS needs just the event table. If this appears as one record for this segment, then when we dissect.
Until Leo fixes it, until he finds that, oh, this is a problem where the two geometries don't match, then until he fixes it, then the LRS that you're submitting doesn't have the functional class information on it.
We're seeing right now we only randomly find these, since last April to now, Tim keeps doing updates, which is good, he's doing his job, but we don't know where to find these two geometry type of errors, as we find it just by looking at it, and that's not an efficient way of doing it. Adam did set up a query that compares the dyne seg length with the geometry length you saw earlier, but that doesn't identify this type of error. And see, if you can modify it, find a different query and symbology to identify this faster, that would maybe something more workable. But currently, we're just randomly finding this type of error, which is not efficient.
But how did that even happen? Adam, do you know why do we have this kind of information?
Yeah, I do. If I could, I'm going to go back to the old test data so that what I'm mangling is not real data. So let me close this. All right. All right, and I have to, sorry guys, I have to change my, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit the underlying route on top of which we digitize these fake F-class events. But to do that, I have to log into Oracle with a user that has privilege to do that. All right. Oops. Yeah. All right. So I'm Kim. All right, and I'm fixing a route. I'm gonna edit this route. Ah, man. Whatever. Hopefully that sticks. Okay, great. And turn these guys back on. So what we are seeing here is so there was a route, and then you know, Leo came and did his job and digitized functional class data on top of this route. And then the GIS unit came in behind him and said, oh, this route needs fixing. And edited the route. And in reality, they'd also recalibrate this route, but we'll bother with that. The point is that both the geometry, the physical geometry, and also the measures are no longer valid. And I'm I'm pretty sure. Although Leo says I'm not right about this. That this change won't be captured in the QA/QC workspace. But whatever. Whether it is or isn't is immaterial. The point is it needs to be.
So you're saying that the LRS actually went in there and redigitize and recalibrate. So if we have a log of all the routes that they changed, we should know where the mistakes are, right?
No, because Marvin and I have been working. Marvin and I have done like 1,000 updates the last 2 months. We have visually found these, quite a few of these the last 2 months and fixed them already. We don't want to go back and retrack each other. We only want to know the ones that have a 2 geometry issue. We don't want to find everything that's changed. He's changed the table. We want to find one that has a 2 geometry issue. We want to narrow we don't want to look at everything. We just want to look at the ones that have a problem. Narrow the field.
Right, and I'm asking what's causing this problem, and what Adam is saying is because the LRS is digitizing some of the routes, right? So if we know what they did, we should be able to find the locations of those routes.
But it's that. Okay, let's say so last April now, let's say he's done a few thousand updates. Marvin and I fixed many of them, not all of them. We didn't want to zoom in to all 10,000 things that Tim has fixed. We just want to zoom into the problem areas. It's not efficient to zoom into 10,000 updates. We only want to zoom into the 2,000 or the 1,000 that are in the air. It's not efficient to go to all 10,000.
So
as we go further into this, we're 6 months into it now. As we're a year into it, 5 years into it, we don't want to look at all a million changes Tim has done.
That's not what I'm saying, though. What I'm saying is, well, how are we going to narrow it down, right?
Yeah, right.
How are we going
just find the problem areas.
Yeah.
Don't find just everything he changed. Only find the problem areas where that's
Do they change that many things all the time?
Truthfully, we're not in maintenance mode yet. Right now, it's major cleanup work. The last 6 to 8 months, it's been major cleanup work. Hopefully, someday it can be more maintenance mode with less changes. Right now, there are a lot of changes.
So there are a lot of changes.
Yeah. Someday we'll be in maintenance mode, not yet.
Okay. Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome. If I could, there's one thing I think I know I failed to bring up as an advantage of taking this kind of geometry first approach, which is that what it does is it creates it supports what the Integraph guys usually call event stability. So it's kind of nice that that we are how do I put this? That we, even after they have moved the route data underneath, so essentially move the tracks underneath our train, that we still know the intent of the begin and end of each event. It's nice that it didn't move, because it means that you have a way to know what was the intent from the beginning. The issue is this: is that if we only had measures and we were only looking at the Dynsegs version of this, then the end of this geometry here would be wherever the measure happened to fall on the route. It would be a much less controlled kind of thing. It would be much more difficult to find that there's an issue at all.
Actually, Marvin and I have been working on this for 2 months. We kind of find the quaternary. This is a very, very simple geometry. When you get into like Los Angeles, those gigantic spaghetti type of interchanges, that's where it gets very confusing. This is a simple geometry. You can see, well, that's the old geometry, that's the new geometry. When you get into complex Los Angeles downtown spaghetti interchange, this is where it gets very complex, and you just overlook them. You overlook the old geometry, new geometry. You say, well, that's just good. It's just, that's the most simple case you can find, probably. In reality, it's much more complex than that, and much more complex geometries than that.
Yeah. Anyhow, all I'm trying to say is that having an anchor, like being able to know what was the intent and refer back to it, you can always look at the DynSeg version of the geometry anytime you want to. There's nothing preventing you from doing that.
Like I said, Marv and I have been working on these G workstations for 2 months, and we're finding it's causing more confusion than it's helpful. It's causing more confusion than it is helpful. Marvin's got 27 years on function class. He knows the intent of the function class. You know, Tim's only changing little bits and pieces here and there. Marvin knows, well, the function class 4 falls 200 feet short, just extended 200 feet. That's not an issue. Marvin's got 27 years experience. It's just a tool geometry thing that confuses people. This happens to be a very simple case. It gets much more complex than this.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Yes. Earlier you said you give a quick example of NHS with one geometry system.
Yeah. You know, I would prefer to schedule that just because I haven't looked at that workflow in 6 months, probably. Would you guys mind reconvening for that?
No, of course not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, Adam, the example we showed you was Sacramento County, the intersection of 160 near I-5.
Yeah, I wrote it down so that I can use it as a test case.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, this was it, right? Stonecrest Avenue at 160?
Yes.
This is what I wrote down. Okay.
Yes. They may be changing that name soon. It's now called, what's Stonecrest called, Marvin? What is Stonecrest's new name? They did some recent construction there, so Stonecrest is now called Consumers River Boulevard, Marvin? Marvin.
Brandon Boulevard.
Joe, it's called Consumers River Boulevard. It's right by your house.
Oh, Consumers?
Yeah. They did new construction in that area, so Stonecrest is no longer called Stonecrest. It's now called Consumers River Boulevard. So Tim could update that any day. Okay?
Okay.
Consumers River Boulevard is the new name for Stonecrest.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have to go anyway. Yeah. Thank you, Adam.
You're welcome. All right, is that it?
Any other questions, Tim, for this functional class? No, I think we are good for now.
Okay. All right. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
So, what are the action items or expectations from him?
He showed you that his QA/QC that compares the DynSeg link versus